Yesterday, on Wednesday, the 1st of May 2024, the Termination of Pregnancy Safe Access Zone Bill was passed into law. And all it waits now is for the President to sign it informally for it to become enforceable. Some of you may know that 2 years ago I produced a video called Together for Lies, which exposed the lies that were told by the Limerick-based group Together for Safety in promoting this legislation. The legislation was introduced on their behalf by Senator Paul Gavin of Sinn Féin and the other Sinn Féin, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael. Some independents supported it and pushed it through. And it has more or less unanimous support, with the exception of a few good people in the Dáil and in the Senate that opposed it. So it's going to become law. In that video, Together for Lies, I posited the idea that perhaps those behind pushing this legislation were actually afraid of something more. They were afraid of the power of prayer, because there was no protests going out. There was no women being harassed outside the maternity hospital. There was simply elderly women that were praying the rosary, as they had done for years, long before abortion was introduced. They pray outside the UHL as well, University Hospital Limerick. They pray for the welfare of the staff and of the patients, and in the maternity hospital in particular, the unborn babies. So it was a lie. The legislation was based on a lie, and furthermore, Drew Harris, the commissioner, Garda commissioner, had said there was no need for the legislation, that there was actually no reports of any such protests or harassment or intimidation that they were aware of, and that there was plenty of laws to deal with it if it occurred. But nonetheless, they pushed it through. And no doubt they're all celebrating now, introducing this legislation on part of a lie. Now, as I said, I did wonder in that video if the people behind it were actually afraid of the power of prayer, and what they wanted to ban was public prayer. And that got me thinking about the actual power of prayer. Now, those of you who know me or have seen some of my videos will be aware that I would call myself an atheist. And I am standing in my hall, and you're probably wondering, what has an atheist got a holy water font in his house for? I even have a mirror there with St. Oliver Plunkett on it, martyr in 1601 by the British, canonised in the 70s. Well, that is a memento of my late granny in Cork, and this was a gift from my mother in 2010. And while I would consider myself to be an atheist, I am not a hater of religion or of religious objects. In fact, I quite admire and like religious objects, and I do actually bless myself in this holy water font, which is actually filled with holy water from the Sacred Heart Church in Limerick. Now, it got me thinking about the power of prayer, because even though I am an atheist, I am what I would consider myself a cultural Catholic, and I do occasionally bless myself when leaving the house, and on a rare occasion I'll say a prayer. And in 2014 I left the house and said a prayer, and it kind of shook the foundations of my disbelief. Back in 2014 I was on a variety of committees. I was on not only the Residents Association Committee here as PRO, but I was on the umbrella group of Our Lady of Lourdes Parish here on their committee. I was their representative. I was the treasurer of that committee. I was a representative of the Our Lady of Lourdes umbrella group on the Community and Voluntary Forum for Limerick City. Now, I was also the Community and Voluntary Forum's representative on the Environmental Strategic Policy Committee and the Council. So I was spending all my time going to meetings, and I felt I was getting nowhere in some instances. But in 2014, things were changing. And the Minister for Environment, who was then Phil Hogan, Fine Gael, had decided he was going to dissolve the Community and Voluntary Forum and establish a new community voice called the Public Participation Network. And from there, we could nominate people onto the different statutory committees. He was also creating a new super committee, the Local Community Development Committee. So as 2014, in April 2014, it was announced that he wanted the Community and Voluntary Forum in Limerick City to nominate 2 people to that committee. So I was going to be coming off the Environmental Committee in June, and I thought to myself, I would love to get on that committee. I would be so well placed. I'd have contacts there with the different officials who actually make the decisions. Now, while I wouldn't be able to say anything at meetings in that regard, my job there would be to represent the Community and Voluntary Forum. before and after meetings, I would be able to talk to these people and see if I could develop a rapport and maybe get a few things done. Well, I didn't feel I had a chance of getting on that committee because I wasn't exactly very popular in the Community and Voluntary Forum. I had been very critical of some of the state-funded community groups, such as the Community Development Project, and had been openly critical of their failure to actually help the communities that they were supposed to represent and work for. So I didn't have any confidence of being nominated. But I blessed myself, and I said, as I left the house, and I said, God, this would be good if I got on this committee. I could do so much. And I headed off to the meeting. Well, when I got to the meeting, I discovered that I was the only viable male candidate. The council had wanted 2 candidates, a male and a female, to be nominated, and they would pick one. It upset some people that they weren't viable, but the reason is that they had a conflict of interest, and to be on this committee, you could not have a conflict of interest because you were going to be funding communities and community groups through the Social Inclusion Activation Community Activation Programme, SICAP as it was known. Be funding these groups lots and lots of money, and if you were a worker for one of these groups or a member of the board, you would have a conflict of interest, so you wouldn't have a vote, and they needed to have a vote. So I went down, I was a nominee. The other nominee, they had to have an election amongst the women in our group. The majority of the Community and Voluntary Forum were actually women. There was only 3 men. The 2 men were employees of community groups that would benefit from SICAP funding. I, on the other hand, was a voluntary community activist, and I was funded by nobody. So I was the only viable option. The women were both members of boards, but they had said if they were nominated to the Community and Voluntary Forum that they would come off the board and therefore remove their conflict of interest. So I was nominated. The council were written to, informed of the nominees, and they wrote back to the Community and Voluntary Forum. And I was told I was rejected. They picked the woman nominee. And from the county Community and Voluntary Forum, they picked the woman nominee as well. So they had rejected the 2 male nominees from both the county and the city. Then in May 2014, Big Phil Hogan changed his mind again and decided the community needed more representation and decided to double the amount of community reps on the committee. So the council wrote to the Community and Voluntary Forum again and asked them to nominate a named individual who was the head at the time of the Limerick's Youth Service. That named individual, as it happened, was a woman, but also she was not a member of our committee. This got everyone's backup, and all of a sudden, I was being supported by everyone on the committee to be the nominee, saying that how dare they dictate to us what we should and who we shouldn't nominate, and Cahill's our nominee, he's going forward. And as one woman present said, also, because he doesn't have a conflict of interest and doesn't require funding, because of this, he'd be able to say things that we couldn't. So even there was an acknowledgement that their funding was a conflict of interest. So I was on the committee. So I attended my first 2 committee meetings, and in June we had to pass the reports that would allow for funding to be released to the SICAP groupings, and it turned out that only myself and one of the women from the County Community Voluntary Forum had no conflict of interest. Now, the law was such that it required a private sector majority to pass anything. In other words, the public sector would be council employees, council officials, and the private sector were people like myself, community activists, voluntary activists. So the votes would actually, everyone, 19 members of the committee, 16 of them would have to leave the room while myself, the other lady, and the city manager voted on everything. It's truly bizarre. In June of 2014, by the end of 2014, the Community and Voluntary Forum had been dissolved, completely dissolved. And the council had failed to establish the public participation network. So now I was sitting on a committee and I had no one to answer to. And I had no one to take instructions from, which was my role. My statutory role was to vote on behalf of the public participation network, essentially, which hadn't been established. So I raised it at several meetings, expressed my reservations of participating at meetings, as I had no one to answer to. Now, by the same token here in Weston Gardens where I live, there was no communication between us and the council. We had 3 burnt out houses on our street, and the council were about to start refurbishing them. But we had safety and security concerns, and they were refusing to meet with us, telling us that they wouldn't speak with us, that they didn't recognise us. This is the regeneration section of the council. So it was very frustrating. Now, as it happens, the chief executive of the LCDC was also the head of the community section. So I had been in touch with him independently in relation to the situation on our street, especially when there was threats issued to burn out the houses, when there was rumours going out that they were going to be giving to people from outside the area. So I had to nip those rumours in the bud. So I had contact with that man who ended up being the chief executive of the LCDC. So I wrote to the council again, looking to have a meeting with our residents' association. Now, at this stage, I had refused to attend the LCDC meetings on the grounds that I had no one to report to us. Therefore, what I was doing there was acting on my own behalf, which I wasn't put there to do. This they had to deal with. But lo and behold, all of a sudden, there was a change of attitude with the council. They actually wanted to meet our residents' association. And we held a meeting then up in their offices in Roxborough, and attending the meeting were heads of the different council sections, the superintendent of the Gardaí, an inspector from the Gardaí, as well as our residents, and all 7 councillors from Limerick City West. Now, compare and contrast that to the attendance of the Southside Regeneration Committee, which 1 or 2 councillors might turn up. The regular community guard would attend it, and lower ranking officials. These were the meetings they wanted originally us to attend, but we were barred from being members of that committee. Bizarre. All of a sudden, we are sitting on the table and we're getting things done. We got our boreen painted. Previously, our association had priced the cost of paint alone at been about €2,000, a monumental task. We got it painted. We got new street lighting in to make it brighter and safer for other people. Sorry about that interruption. That was my eldest returning home from work. I have to splice this together now, I guess. So much for spontaneous videos. Where was I? Yes, we had established meetings with the council to discuss the regeneration of our street, and we were getting things done. The most important thing we got done was the giving out of the houses to people in the local area. In the past, people would the houses would be refurbished or built, and people from outside might get them. Cause great upset in the community because they're supposed to be for the regeneration area. So I waited until we had conducted all the business, and I really pushed it to the 11th hour. I did not want to affect the money being given out. I didn't want to have any communities affected by my non-attendance of meetings and refusing to vote. So in October 2015, I attended an LCDC meeting, and I voted. Myself, the city manager, and the other woman, we voted to release the funding. A few months of a delay, but nothing that would affect anybody directly. After that, we had another meeting on the 27th of October 2015 with the Residents Association and the council. But at this meeting, none of the councillors attended, none of the Gardaí attended, and low-ranking officials came and were very snotty with us. It was a horrendous meeting. We were putting forward proposals to improve the area further. Proposals we called Less Prison, More Park. She wouldn't even take it off her hands. But it told me that absolutely I had hidden power there. Not only had I got on that committee, but I got so much done. And it just always stuck with me that I had said that prayer to go on that committee. So I don't know, what do you think? Do you think it was just a sheer happenstance, a series of lucky coincidences, or was there some sort of divine intervention that ensured that I got a place in that committee? Because it was just an amazing result in the end. I couldn't have dreamed for a better response. I mean, I had only hoped to be on the committee to have access to officials, to talk to officials. I didn't think that I would have any kind of power that would sway things in my favour. So let me know in the comments what you think. I'd be interested to know. And maybe perhaps we should end with a prayer. So in Amalahar, Oxen Vig, Oxen Sprid Nave. Holy Father, please watch over and guard Shiakana and guide their hands so that all their actions may be informed by justice and righteousness. Please ensure that they keep their oath to defend and protect our communities. Also, please wake up the Irish people so they can see through the lies that are being told, political lies at every level, and they may act accordingly on June the 7th. In Anamanahar, Agus and Vic, Agus and Sprid Nave. Amen. Until the next time, be seeing you.